Now I'm here with Miss Irwin-Bass, Hempfield's new Director of Communications. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me here today.
That's great. So when did you become Hempfield's new Director of Communications?
I started in September, right after the Labor Day break, so almost from the beginning of the year, but not quite.
Gotcha. So what were you prior to this? What was the build-up before coming here?
Sure. Well, I started my career as a journalist, and I was a reporter who was covering a local school district here in Lancaster County, and I was hired away to become their first community relations director for the school district. Stayed there for several years, and then after that I moved on to some nonprofit work where I worked for an organization that supported businesses throughout Lancaster County. I also have some marketing agency experience, and I teach part-time. Currently I teach in the communications department at Millersville University, and I've also taught at Elizabethtown College as well.
Where did you go for school?
Sure, I graduated from Millersville University, and then I earned my master's degree from Shippensburg University in communication studies.
So what exactly do you do as the Director of Communications?
Sure. As the Director of Communications, it's my responsibility to basically communicate the events, news, activities, etc., of the district to internal and external audiences. So internally that means, to students, teachers, staff throughout the district in the various buildings, and externally that means outreach to parents, families, residents of the district, businesses, the business community within the district, media, and then other organizations that we work closely with as well.
Mm-hmm. What are some hardships that you have to deal with as the Director of Communications here?
Well, one of the things is you have to be good at kind of thinking on your feet, because sometimes things come up, rather suddenly that you have to be able to address. And I think, somewhat related to that is you don't plan when things happen that you must communicate, whether it's, an emergency or a crisis or just something that happens during off hours. So to a certain degree, you're kind of always on the clock in terms of maybe having to respond to certain emergency or crises.
So you said that you started back in September as the director. Mm-hmm. How have things for you personally been going since then?
Sure. Well, there's certainly a lot to learn. It's a rather large district with a lot of different schools within the district, and a lot of people, and just getting to know the community as well. But one of the things that I've taken the advantage of doing is working on a complete communications audit, which is just looking at all of the different channels and the ways that we communicate, both internally and externally, the frequency of that, who the target audiences are, and then really, trying to assess whether or not there are any gaps there. Could we be doing a better job communicating to certain audiences, or maybe a little bit more frequent, et cetera. So I'm in the process now of kind of analyzing all of that, and then we'll make some recommendations on how we can be more efficient and effective with our communications.
Your job, so it's mainly about communicating out to people, reaching out. So I'm sure you'd have a lot to do with COVID and letting people know all the updates about that. How exactly does that go for you?
Sure. So we started a landing page or a web page on the district website that is kind of about all things COVID. So there we have any kind of updates or news, information, resources for people, answers to frequently asked questions. We also update a COVID case chart every week that we have to do for the state, but we also want to make sure that the community is aware and can get that information easily as well.
Gotcha. So another thing, you help out with what we do, Hempfield Happenings. Mm-hmm. How has that experience been for you?
Well, it's actually probably one of the best parts of the job is really, is working with students, and especially, students who are interested in communications, who are getting into the field. So, I am able to help just with, maybe on story angles, how to pitch stories, story ideas, and things like that. But it's really a pleasure for me to get to work, hands-on with the students, and help them along in their career if this is what they want to do.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, thank you so much for coming on to the show. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me.